Grandma, don't eat that! Isaiah's voice cut through the dinner chatter like a knife. My 10-year-old grandson was standing up from his chair, his little hand stretched across the table toward me. His eyes were wide with something I'd never seen before. Fear. I looked down at my plate. Keisha's famous mac and cheese, collard greens, fried chicken, cornbread. Everything looked perfect, smelled perfect. The whole family was gathered around my dining room table on this Sunday evening. My son Darnell, his wife Keisha, their boy Isaiah, and Keisha's mother Brenda. "Why, baby?" I asked, my fork frozen halfway to my mouth. "Please," Isaiah's voice cracked. Tears were forming in his eyes. "Please, just leave." The room went silent. Keisha's face turned red. "Isaiah, sit down right now. What has gotten into you?" But I knew my grandson. That boy had never acted out like this in his life. He was trying to tell me something. My heart started pounding in my chest, and in that split second, I made a decision that would change everything. "Brenda," I said, turning to my daughter-in-law's mother with a smile. "You know what? I'm feeling a bit under the weather. Why don't we switch plates? I made yours with a little less salt, and I think that might sit better with me right now." Before anyone could protest, I slid my plate across the table to Brenda and pulled hers toward me. Keisha's face went white. "Mom, no, don't." But Brenda had already taken a big bite of the mac and cheese. She smiled at me. "Dorothy, you're always so thoughtful." 15 minutes later, Brenda's fork clattered to the floor. Her eyes rolled back in her head, and she slumped forward onto the table. 10 minutes after that, my living room was filled with police officers, and my whole life was turned upside down. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how we got here. Before we continue, please tell us where you're watching from so we know how far our stories reach, and subscribe to the channel to help us grow. My name is Dorothy Jenkins, and I'm 68 years old. I've lived in the same house in Atlanta for 43 years. My husband Raymond died 8 years ago from a heart attack. He left me this house, paid off, and a decent amount of savings. Not rich, but comfortable. Ray worked for the Postal Service for 30 years, and I was a school cafeteria manager for 25. We lived below our means, saved our money, and raised one son, Darnell. Darnell was our pride and joy. Smart as a whip, went to Morehouse College, became an accountant. When he brought Keisha home 6 years ago, I wanted to be happy. I really did. She was pretty, well-spoken, had a degree from Georgia State. On paper, she was perfect. But something in my spirit just didn't sit right. Maybe it was the way she looked at my house, not with warmth, but like she was counting the value of everything. Maybe it was how she asked about Ray's life insurance within the first month of dating Darnell. Or maybe it was just a mother's intuition. "Mama, you're being too hard on her," Darnell said when I tried to share my concerns. Keisha comes from a difficult background. She's just practical about money because she grew up without it. I let it go. I wanted my son to be happy, and when Isaiah was born 4 years ago, I fell in love with that little boy instantly. I decided to keep my concerns to myself and just be there for my family. The first year after they got married was fine. They lived in their own apartment across town, and we saw each other every Sunday after church. I attend Greater Hope Missionary Baptist Church, same place I've gone for 30 years. My church family knew me, loved me, and I had my community. But then, things started to change. It began small. Keisha started suggesting that I was getting too old to live alone. "Dorothy, what if you fall? What if something happens and nobody's here?" She'd say this with concern in her voice, but her eyes told a different story. Then Darnell started having financial troubles. Suddenly, my successful accountant's son needed to borrow $5,000. Then another $3,000. Then more. Each time, he promised to pay me back. He never did. "Mama, Keisha's mother is sick," he explained one day. "We have to help with her medical bills." I met Brenda a few times. She didn't look sick to me. She looked healthy as a horse, driving a brand new Lexus and wearing expensive jewelry. But I gave them the money anyway. What else was a mother supposed to do? Then, about 6 months ago, they asked to move in with me. Just temporarily, Darnell said. We're having some trouble with our lease, and we need to save money for a down payment on a house. Against my better judgment, I said yes. My house had 4 bedrooms. I figured we could make it work for a few months. That's when things got really strange. Keisha immediately started changing things. She rearranged my kitchen. She redecorated the living room. She even tried to go through my important papers, claiming she was just trying to help organize. "Dorothy, at your age, you really should have someone helping you manage your affairs," she said one evening, standing in my bedroom doorway. "Darnell is an accountant. He could take over your finances, make sure everything is in order." "My affairs are just fine, thank you," I told her firmly. But the pressure continued. Every week, there was a new suggestion. Put the house in a trust. Add Darnell to my bank accounts. Sign a power of attorney. Update my will. I talked to my friend Lorraine from church about it. Lorraine had been my best friend for 25 years. She was a retired social worker and had seen every kind of family drama imaginable. "Dorothy, baby, that doesn't sound right," Lorraine said over coffee at her kitchen table. "Why are they so interested in your finances all of a sudden?" "I don't know," I admitted, "but something feels wrong." "Have you talked to a lawyer?" I hadn't, but Lorraine's question planted a seed in my mind. The next week, I quietly made an appointment with an attorney named Mr. Bernard Washington. He had an office downtown and came highly recommended from one of the deacons at church. "Mrs. Jenkins," Mr. Washington said after I explained my situation, "I want to be very direct with you. What you're describing sounds like financial exploitation. It happens to elderly people more often than you'd think. And sadly, it's usually family members who are behind it." The word exploitation hit me like a punch to the stomach. "But Darnell is my son. He wouldn't—" "I'm not saying your son is behind it," Mr. Washington interrupted gently. "But I am saying you need to protect yourself. Don't sign anything without having me review it first. Don't add anyone to your accounts. And document everything. Every conversation, every request for money, everything." I left his office feeling shaken. Was I being paranoid? Was I being an overly suspicious old woman who couldn't accept that her son was just trying to help? But then things escalated. 2 months ago, I caught Keisha in my bedroom, going through my jewelry box. When I confronted her, she claimed she was looking for earrings I'd promised to lend her. I'd never promised her any such thing. A month ago, I overheard her on the phone with someone. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but her voice carried from the kitchen. "It's taking too long," she was saying. "We need to speed things up. She's stubborn, and she's not going to just hand everything over." My blood ran cold. That night, I called Lorraine again. "I think you were right," I told her. "I think something bad is happening." "What do you need me to do?" Lorraine asked immediately. "Just keep an eye on things. If something happens to me, if I get sick or have an accident, please make sure someone investigates." "Dorothy, you're scaring me." "I'm scaring myself." The next week, little Isaiah started acting different around me. He'd always been a cheerful, talkative boy, but suddenly he was quiet, withdrawn. When his parents weren't looking, he'd watch them with this worried expression on his face. One afternoon, when Keisha and Darnell were out, Isaiah came into my room. He closed the door behind him, which was unusual. "Grandma?" he said quietly. "Yes, baby?" "Can I tell you a secret?" "Of course you can." He sat down on the edge of my bed, fidgeting with his hands. "I heard Mommy and Grandma Brenda talking." Brenda had been coming over more often lately, always whispering with Keisha in corners. "What did you hear?" I asked gently. Isaiah looked up at me with those big brown eyes. "They were talking about making you sick. They said if you got sick, Daddy would have to take care of your money, and then they could buy a big new house." My heart stopped. "Isaiah, baby, are you sure that's what you heard?" He nodded, tears forming in his eyes. I'm scared, Grandma. I don't want you to get sick. I love you. I pulled him into a hug, my mind racing. A 10-year-old could misunderstand things, misinterpret conversations, but combined with everything else that had been happening. It's going to be okay, I told him, even though I didn't know if that was true. But Isaiah, I need you to promise me something. If anything strange happens, if you see or hear anything else, you come tell me right away. Can you do that? He nodded against my shoulder. That conversation was 2 weeks ago. Since then, I'd been watching everything carefully. I stopped eating food that Keisha prepared unless everyone else was eating the exact same thing. I locked my bedroom door at night. I made copies of all my important documents and gave them to Lorraine for safekeeping. And I waited. I didn't know what I was waiting for exactly, but I knew something was coming. Then, yesterday morning, Keisha announced we were having a special family dinner on Sunday. Just us and my mama, she said with a bright smile that didn't reach her eyes. Dorothy, don't worry about cooking. I'll handle everything. That's when I knew. I couldn't explain how I knew, but deep in my bones, I understood that this dinner was going to be the moment. Whatever they'd been planning, it was happening tomorrow. I spent all of Saturday praying. I went to see Lorraine and told her everything, including what Isaiah had overheard. You need to call the police, Lorraine said. And tell them what? That my daughter-in-law might be planning something based on a conversation a 10-year-old overheard? They'll think I'm a paranoid old woman. Then what are you going to do? I don't know yet, but I'll figure it out. Sunday morning, I went to church service like always. Pastor Williams preached about betrayal, about how sometimes the people closest to you are the ones who hurt you the most. But God sees everything, and justice will prevail. I held on to those words as I drove home. The dinner table was set beautifully when I arrived. Keisha had outdone herself. My grandmother's china, fresh flowers, candles. It looked like a celebration. Everything smells wonderful, I said, because what else could I say? We all sat down. Brenda was there, wearing a fancy dress and too much perfume. She kept exchanging glances with Keisha that I pretended not to notice. Darnell seemed oblivious to all of it, talking about a new client at work. Isaiah was silent, pushing food around on his plate, his eyes darting between me and his mother. That's when Keisha brought out my plate. She set it down in front of me with a smile. I made your favorites, Dorothy. Extra cheese in the mac and cheese, just how you like it. I looked down at the food. It looked delicious. It smelled delicious. And that's when Isaiah jumped up from his chair. Grandma, don't eat that! Now, as I sit here in my living room watching paramedics load Brenda onto a stretcher while police officers question Keisha, I finally understand the full picture. The food on my original plate was poisoned. They'd planned to kill me and make it look like a heart attack or stroke. An old woman living alone, nobody would question it too hard. But they'd made one critical mistake. They'd underestimated how much a little boy loved his grandmother. And they'd underestimated how much I trusted him in return. Detective Maria Rodriguez approached me as they were putting Keisha in handcuffs. Mrs. Jenkins, we're going to need your full statement. But I want you to know, that was incredibly brave what you did. And incredibly risky. Detective, I said, my voice shaking now that the adrenaline was wearing off. Can you tell me what was in that food? She glanced at her partner, then back at me. We'll need to wait for the lab results, but based on Mrs. Mitchell's symptoms, it appears to be some kind of sedative mixed with another substance. A lot of it. If you'd eaten that plate. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Darnell was standing in the corner, his face in his hands, sobbing. I didn't know, he kept saying. I swear to God, Mama, I didn't know. I wanted to believe him. God help me, part of me still wanted to believe my son had no part in this. But how could he not have known? He lived in this house. He saw how Keisha acted, heard the things she said. Or maybe he just didn't want to see it. Maybe he loved her too much, Or maybe he was too afraid to face the truth about who he'd married. Isaiah ran to me and wrapped his arms around my waist. I held him tight, this brave little boy who'd saved my life. "It's okay, Grandma," he whispered. "You're safe now." But as I watched them take both Keisha and Brenda away, and as more police officers arrived to process the scene, I realized this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Because Detective Rodriguez had just received a phone call, and the expression on her face when she hung up told me something else was about to happen. She walked over to me slowly, her eyes serious. "Mrs. Jenkins, I need to ask you something. Has your daughter-in-law or anyone else had access to your medications? Your prescription bottles?" My blood ran cold. "Yes," I said quietly. "They're in my bathroom cabinet." "Why?" "We need to check something," she said, motioning to another officer. "Right now." And that's when I realized the poisoned dinner wasn't the only thing they'd planned. Detective Rodriguez returned from my bathroom 15 minutes later holding a clear evidence bag. Inside were 3 of my prescription bottles, my blood pressure medication, my cholesterol pills, and my vitamin D supplements. "Mrs. Jenkins," she said, her voice tight with anger, "when was the last time you took any of these medications?" "This morning," I said. "I take them every day with breakfast. Why? What's wrong?" She held up the bag. "These bottles have been tampered with. We'll need to run tests, but it appears someone has been replacing some of your actual medication with something else, possibly for weeks or months." The room started spinning. I sat down hard on my couch, and Isaiah pressed closer against my side. "That's why—" I couldn't finish the sentence. My mind was racing back through the past few months. The dizzy spells I'd been having, the confusion, the memory lapses that had started happening more frequently. I'd thought I was just getting old, that my mind was slipping. "That's why you've been feeling ill," Detective Rodriguez finished for me. "Mrs. Jenkins, I believe this was a long-term plan. They were trying to make you appear mentally incompetent so they could take control of your finances legally. And when that wasn't working fast enough..." She glanced toward the kitchen where crime scene technicians were still collecting evidence. "They decided to speed up the process." Lorraine burst through my front door at that moment, nearly knocking over a police officer. "Dorothy, I saw the ambulances from down the street. Oh my Lord, what happened?" I told her everything. As I spoke, I watched my best friend's face cycle through shock, horror, and finally, a cold fury I'd never seen in her before. "That evil, evil woman," Lorraine said when I finished. "And to think she sat in our church every Sunday, smiling and praising the Lord while plotting to kill you." "Ma'am, did you say church?" Detective Rodriguez looked up from her notepad. "Mrs. Jenkins attends church regularly?" "Greater Hope Missionary Baptist," Lorraine said. "Every Sunday for 30 years. Everybody there knows Dorothy." The detective nodded, writing something down. "That's good. Community witnesses are important. Mrs. Jenkins, I need you to think carefully. Have you noticed any other strange occurrences? Any accidents that seemed suspicious? Any other times you felt unusually ill?" I thought back. About a month ago, I fell down the stairs. I was dizzy, lost my balance. Keisha was the only one home. She acted very concerned, wanted to take me to the hospital. But then she kept suggesting maybe I shouldn't be living alone anymore. Maybe I needed full-time care. "Or maybe she needed you to fall down the stairs," Detective Rodriguez said grimly. "Did you go to the hospital?" "No. Keisha said if I felt fine, there was no need to spend the money. She insisted on it, actually. Said hospitals were too expensive." "Because she didn't want there to be any medical record of the fall," the detective explained. "Mrs. Jenkins, I'm going to be honest with you. This case is bigger than we initially thought. We're not just talking about attempted murder anymore. This is elder abuse, financial exploitation, possibly fraud and conspiracy. We need to dig into everything. Your finances, your legal documents, phone records, everything." Darnell finally spoke up from his corner. "Detective, please. I swear I didn't know about any of this. I thought Keisha was just worried about my mother. That's all I thought it was." Detective Rodriguez turned to him, her expression hard. "Mr. Jenkins, where do you work?" "I'm an accountant at Morrison and Associates." "And you never noticed anything unusual about your mother's finances? You never thought it was strange that your wife was so interested in gaining access to your mother's accounts?" Darnell's face crumpled. I trusted my wife. She said she was trying to help. She said her mother had experience with elder care and knew what signs to look for. I believed her." "Your wife's mother who just got rushed to the hospital after eating poisoned food?" The detective's voice was sharp. "Mr. Jenkins, I suggest you get yourself a lawyer, because right now you're either an accomplice or a fool, and we need to figure out which one." Isaiah suddenly spoke up, his small voice cutting through the tension. "Daddy didn't know. I heard Mommy tell Grandma Brenda that Daddy was too stupid to figure it out. She said he believed whatever she told him." Everyone in the room went silent. Darnell made a sound like he'd been punched in the stomach. "Isaiah," Detective Rodriguez said gently, kneeling down to the boy's level. "Do you remember anything else your mother said?" Isaiah nodded, tears streaming down his face now. "She said once they got all of Grandma's money, she was going to leave Daddy anyway. She said she never loved him. She just married him because she found out Grandma had money. She said—" He hiccuped, struggling to get the words out. "She said Daddy was just a means to an end." Darnell let out a sob and slid down the wall to the floor. Oh, God, what have I done? Mama, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." I wanted to go to him. Despite everything, he was still my son. But my legs wouldn't move. The betrayal, even if he hadn't known about the poisoning, he'd still chosen Keisha over me, had still allowed her to move into my home and take over my life. Mr. Washington, my attorney, arrived 20 minutes later. I'd called him from the kitchen while the detective was questioning Darnell. He swept in wearing a sharp suit, his silver hair perfectly styled, carrying a briefcase that looked expensive. "Dorothy, are you all right?" he asked immediately, taking my hands in his. "I've been better, Bernard." He looked around at the chaos. Police officers, crime scene tape, equipment everywhere. "Tell me everything." I did. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment, his jaw tight. "We're going to bury them," he said finally. "Legally speaking, they've made this very easy for us. Attempted murder, elder abuse, fraud, we have everything we need. But first, we need to secure your assets immediately. Detective Rodriguez, I assume Mrs. Jenkins's home is now a crime scene?" "Part of it, yes. The kitchen and dining room primarily. Mrs. Jenkins, I'm afraid you can't stay here tonight. Maybe not for several days while we process everything." "She'll stay with me," Lorraine said immediately. "I've got plenty of room." Mr. Washington nodded. "Good. Dorothy, first thing tomorrow morning, we're going to the bank. We're changing all your passwords, securing all your accounts, and I want to review every financial transaction you've made in the past year. Every single one." "What about Darnell?" I asked quietly. "And Isaiah?" "Mr. Jenkins," Mr. Washington said, turning to my son. "Do you own any property jointly with your wife?" Darnell shook his head. "No. We were renting before we moved in here. We don't own anything together except our car." "And you have a separate bank account from hers?" "Yes. She insisted on keeping our finances separate. She said she was independent and wanted her own money." Darnell laughed bitterly. "I guess now I know why." "Then you and your son can stay at a hotel for now. Detective Rodriguez will likely want you available for questioning, but I don't believe you're going to be charged. However, you need to hire your own attorney immediately. I can give you some names." "What about Isaiah?" I asked. "He can't stay in a hotel. He needs stability." Lorraine spoke up. "He can stay with us too. I've got a grandson about his age. They can share a room." Isaiah looked up at me with hopeful eyes. "Can I, Grandma? Please?" "Of course, baby." Detective Rodriguez's phone rang. She stepped away to answer it, and when she came back, her expression had changed. She looked excited. "Mrs. Jenkins, we just got a warrant to search Mrs. Keisha Jenkins's phone and computer, and we found something interesting. She's been communicating with someone else, a man named Terrence Gaines. Do you know that name?" I shook my head, but Darnell gasped. "That's Keisha's ex-boyfriend. She told me they broke up before we started dating." "According to these messages," Detective Rodriguez said, looking at her phone, "they never broke up. In fact, they've been in a relationship this entire time. And Mrs. Jenkins, you're going to want to hear this." In a message from 3 months ago, Keisha wrote, "We're almost there. The old woman is getting sicker. Once she's gone, we get everything. Then we can finally be together like we always planned." The room erupted. Darnell started shouting, demanding to see the messages. Mr. Washington was already on his phone, presumably calling someone important. Lorraine was hugging me so tight I could barely breathe. But all I could think about was Isaiah. This precious little boy who'd saved my life was learning that his mother was not who he thought she was, that she'd planned to kill his grandmother, that she'd never really loved his father, that his entire family was a lie. I pulled away from Lorraine and held out my arms to Isaiah. He came to me immediately, and I held him while he cried into my shoulder. "I've got you, baby," I whispered. "We're going to get through this. I promise." Detective Rodriguez continued reading from her phone. "There's more. According to these messages, Keisha and Terrence have been planning this for over 2 years. They researched you, Mrs. Jenkins, found out about your assets from public records. Keisha specifically targeted your son, got pregnant on purpose to speed up the marriage. This was all calculated." "But Brenda," I said suddenly, "Keisha's mother, she was in on it too. Was she really going to let her own daughter poison her?" "We're questioning Mrs. Mitchell at the hospital now," the detective said. "But based on what we're seeing in these messages, I don't think she knew about the poisoning. Keisha was planning to betray her own mother too. She wrote to Terrence, 'My mother is getting too greedy. She wants a bigger cut. Once this is over, we might need to handle her too.'" Even after everything, that shocked me. To plot against your own mother? "Mrs. Mitchell is cooperating with us now," Detective Rodriguez continued. "She's providing information about the financial scheme. Apparently they were planning to have you declared incompetent, move you into a nursing home, and then sell your house and liquidate your assets. Mrs. Mitchell was supposed to get a portion of the money, but according to these messages, Keisha never intended to pay her." Mr. Washington looked grim. "This is attempted capital murder, conspiracy, elder abuse, fraud, and financial exploitation. Dorothy, these people are going to prison for a very long time." "What happens now?" I asked. "Now we build the case," Detective Rodriguez said. "The DA is going to love this one. We have physical evidence, witness testimony, written confessions in the form of text messages, and a victim who's alive and well because she was smart enough to switch plates. Mrs. Jenkins, you did everything right." Over the next several hours, I gave my statement. Then Darnell gave his. Then Isaiah gave his, with a child advocate present. Lorraine gave a statement about what I'd confided in her over the past months. By the time we were done, it was nearly midnight. The police said I could pack a bag, and they escorted me to my bedroom. As I gathered my clothes and toiletries, I looked around at the room I'd shared with Raymond for so many years. "I'm sorry, Ray," I whispered. "I'm sorry I let them into our home." But then I thought about it. Raymond would have been proud of me tonight. I'd been smart, I'd trusted my instincts, I'd protected our grandson, and I'd survived. I packed my bag and walked out with my head held high. At Lorraine's house, I tucked Isaiah into bed in the guest room. "Grandma," he said sleepily, "are you going to be okay?" "Yes, baby, we're both going to be okay." "What's going to happen to Mommy?" I took a deep breath. I don't know yet. But I know that what she did was very wrong, and she's going to have to face consequences. I still love her, he said quietly, even though she's bad. Is that wrong? My heart broke. No, sweetheart, that's not wrong. She's still your mother. It's okay to love her and be angry with her at the same time. He nodded and closed his eyes. Within minutes, he was asleep. I went to the living room where Lorraine was making tea. We sat together in silence for a while. Dorothy, she finally said, what are you going to do about Darnell? I don't know, I admitted. He says he didn't know, and I believe him. But he still chose her over me. He still let her manipulate him. He's hurting too, Lorraine said gently. He just found out his whole marriage was a lie. I know, and I do feel sorry for him, but I can't just forgive and forget. Lorraine, not yet. She patted my hand. Nobody's asking you to. Take your time. Feel what you need to feel. I went to bed around 2 a.m, exhausted but unable to sleep. My mind kept replaying the dinner, the moment Isaiah shouted, the decision to switch plates. What if I hadn't trusted him? What if I'd dismissed his warning as childish dramatics? I would be dead. They would have won. But they didn't win. And now I was going to make sure they paid for what they'd tried to do. The next morning, Detective Rodriguez called at 8. Mrs. Jenkins, I need you to come down to the station. We've made another arrest. Who? I asked, my stomach sinking. Terrence Gaines. We picked him up last night. And Mrs. Jenkins, he's talking. He's giving us everything. But there's something you need to know. Something we found in Keisha's storage unit. What is it? There was a pause on the other end of the line. Mrs. Jenkins, we found documents. Forged documents with your signature. A will leaving everything to Keisha. A power of attorney. Transfer deeds. They were planning to claim you'd signed everything months ago before you became incompetent. If you had died last night, these documents would have been filed within days. My blood ran cold. But I never signed anything. We know. The forgery is obvious to experts. But Mrs. Jenkins, if you had died, if there had been no investigation, these documents might have been accepted, at least initially. By the time anyone proved they were fake, your assets would have been gone. I closed my eyes. They'd thought of everything, every possible angle. There's one more thing, Detective Rodriguez said, and her voice was strange now, uncertain. When we arrested Terrence, he said something. He said, and I quote, "This isn't over. You don't know who you're dealing with. Mrs. Jenkins, we need to put you in protective custody. We believe there may be others involved." Others? My voice came out as a whisper. What do you mean, others? We're still investigating, but it appears Keisha and Terrence may have done this before. To other elderly people. In other states. Mrs. Jenkins, you may not have been their first target. And based on what Terrence said, we're concerned that their associates might try to retaliate or silence you before trial. I heard myself say, I'll come to the station right away. But my mind was somewhere else entirely. This wasn't just about me and my family anymore. This was something much bigger, much darker, and it was far from over. I sat in a small conference room at the Atlanta Police Department, surrounded by Detective Rodriguez, 2 FBI agents, and Mr. Washington. They'd laid out photographs on the table in front of me, pictures of elderly people I'd never seen before. Mrs. Jenkins, Agent Marcus Freeman said, sliding the photos closer to me. Do you recognize any of these people? I studied each face carefully. No, I've never seen them before. Who are they? They're victims, Agent Freeman said quietly. Or we believe they are. Margaret Thompson from Birmingham, Alabama, died 6 months ago from what was ruled a heart attack. Her nephew and his girlfriend inherited everything. Curtis Hayes from Memphis, Tennessee, died from a fall down the stairs 8 months ago. His caretaker, who'd only been working for him for 4 months, inherited his estate. Doris Patterson from Jacksonville, Florida. Wait, I interrupted. You're saying Keisha and Terrence killed all these people? Not Keisha and Terrence directly, Agent Sarah Chen spoke up. We believe they're part of a larger organization, an elder fraud ring that's been operating across the Southeast for at least 3 years. They identify wealthy, elderly people with limited family, establish relationships through romance or caregiving, gain access to their finances, and then either coerce them into signing over their assets or eliminate them. My hands started shaking. How many people? We've identified 12 suspicious cases so far, Agent Freeman said. But there may be more. Mrs. Jenkins, the reason we need you in protective custody is because you're the first victim who survived. You're the first person who can testify about what they tried to do, and that makes you extremely valuable to our case, and extremely dangerous to their organization. What organization? Mr. Washington demanded. Who's running this? We don't know yet, Agent Chen admitted. Terrence is talking, but he claims he only knows Keisha and one contact person. The operation is compartmentalized. Each team works independently, but someone is coordinating this, training them, providing them with forged documents, helping them identify targets. Detective Rodriguez leaned forward. Mrs. Jenkins, we need you to think carefully. Has anyone else been unusually interested in you? Any new friends who seem to appear around the same time Keisha came into your life? Anyone at your church, maybe? Your community center? I thought back through the past 2 years, trying to remember. There was a woman who started attending Greater Hope about a year ago. Her name was Vanessa something. She was very friendly, always asking questions about people's families, who lived alone, who had recently lost a spouse. But Pastor Williams said she stopped coming after about 6 months. The agents exchanged glances. Can you describe her? I did my best. Agent Chen pulled out a tablet and showed me a series of photographs. I pointed to one immediately. That's her. That's Vanessa. Her real name is Monica Pritchard, Agent Freeman said grimly. She's a recruiter. She identifies potential targets and passes the information to operatives like Keisha and Terrence. Mrs. Jenkins, do you remember telling Vanessa anything about your financial situation? My stomach dropped. It was after church one Sunday. We were having coffee in the fellowship hall. She was so easy to talk to. She said she'd lost her mother recently and was having trouble dealing with the estate. I mentioned that I'd been worried about estate planning too, that my husband had left me comfortable, but I wasn't sure how to protect it for my son. Oh God. You didn't do anything wrong, Agent Chen said firmly. These people are professionals. They're trained to extract information without you realizing you're giving it. Mrs. Jenkins, that conversation likely led them directly to you. How did Keisha end up with Darnell? I asked. We're still piecing that together, Detective Rodriguez said. But we believe Monica provided them with information about your son, where he worked, where he socialized. Keisha accidentally met him at a conference for accountants, made it seem like fate. I felt sick. My poor son. He'd thought he was falling in love, and it was all manufactured. What happens now? Mr. Washington asked. Now we prepare for trial, Agent Freeman said. But first, we need to track down everyone involved in this organization. Keisha and Terrence are in custody. Brenda Mitchell is cooperating. She's taking a plea deal in exchange for testimony. She claims she didn't know about the attempted murder, only the financial exploitation, and she's agreed to tell us everything she knows about how the operation worked. And Darnell? I asked quietly. Your son has been cleared, Detective Rodriguez said. We've verified that he had no knowledge of the conspiracy. His phone records, emails, bank accounts, everything checks out. He was an unwitting pawn, Mrs. Jenkins. They used him to get to you. I didn't know how to feel about that. Relief that my son wasn't a criminal. Sadness that he'd been so thoroughly deceived. Anger that he'd been so blind. Mrs. Jenkins, Agent Chen said gently, we're going to set you up in a safe house for the next few weeks. just until we've rounded up the rest of the organization and ensured there's no threat to you. What about Isaiah and Darnell? They can go home. Well, they'll need to find a new home since your house is still a crime scene. But they're not in danger. You're the only witness they'd have reason to target. No, I said firmly. Everyone looked at me in surprise. No, I'm not hiding. These people have taken enough from me. My peace of mind, my sense of safety in my own home, months of my life while they slowly poisoned me. I'm not giving them any more. I'll take precautions, but I'm not hiding. Mr. Washington smiled. That's the Dorothy I know. Agent Freeman looked concerned, but Agent Chen nodded slowly. We can arrange security, 24-hour protection. But Mrs. Jenkins, you need to understand the risk. I understand perfectly, I said, and I'm not backing down. The next 3 months were intense. I stayed at Lorraine's house with a police officer stationed outside at all times. Isaiah stayed with us, going to school under watchful eyes. Darnell found an apartment nearby and visited every day, trying to rebuild the relationship with both of us. The first time Darnell and I really talked, he broke down completely. Mama, I'm so sorry, he sobbed, sitting at Lorraine's kitchen table. I should have seen it. I should have protected you. Baby, she fooled everyone, I said, though part of me was still angry. She was a professional con artist. But I'm your son. I should have listened when you said something felt wrong. Instead, I defended her. I chose her over you. He looked at me with red, swollen eyes. How can you ever forgive me? I took a deep breath. Darnell, I love you. You're my son, and nothing will ever change that. But forgiveness, that's going to take time. You hurt me. Even if you didn't mean to, even if you were being manipulated, you still hurt me. I need time to heal from that. He nodded, tears streaming down his face. I understand. I'll wait as long as it takes. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. Start by being a good father to Isaiah, I said. That boy has been through hell. He needs you to be strong for him. I will. I promise. And to his credit, Darnell kept that promise. He started taking Isaiah to therapy. He joined a support group for victims of romantic fraud. He slowly started putting his life back together. Meanwhile, the FBI's investigation expanded. They arrested Monica Pritchard in South Carolina. They found 2 more operatives in Georgia and Florida. They discovered a money trail leading to offshore accounts. And then, 4 months after that terrible Sunday dinner, they found the person at the top. His name was Vincent Crawford, and he was a disbarred attorney who'd spent 15 years perfecting this operation. He'd recruited dozens of operatives, trained them in elder fraud techniques, provided them with forged documents, and taken a percentage of every score. The FBI estimated his organization had stolen over $20 million from elderly victims across 7 states. The trial began in September. The courthouse was packed every day. News cameras lined the streets. This case had become national news. The elderly woman who'd outsmarted a sophisticated fraud ring, the brave grandson who'd saved her life, the massive conspiracy that preyed on vulnerable seniors. I sat in that witness stand for 3 days, telling my story over and over. Keisha's defense attorney tried to rattle me, suggesting I was confused, that I'd misunderstood, that I was a paranoid old woman who'd ruined an innocent woman's life. But I had Agent Chen's advice in my head. Stay calm, stick to the facts, and remember, the evidence speaks for itself. And the evidence was overwhelming. The poisoned food, confirmed by lab tests, the tampered medications, the text messages between Keisha and Terrence, the forged documents, Brenda's testimony about the conspiracy, Isaiah's heartbreaking account of what he'd overheard. When Isaiah took the stand, there wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom. He was so small in that big chair, speaking into the microphone in his clear, honest voice about how he'd heard his mother planning to hurt his grandmother. I love my mom, he said at one point, his voice breaking. But what she wanted to do was wrong. Grandma Dorothy is the best person I know. She makes me pancakes and helps me with homework and tells me stories about my grandpa. I couldn't let them hurt her. The prosecutor asked, "Were you scared when you shouted at dinner?" "Yes," Isaiah said. "I was really scared. But I was more scared of losing my grandma." Keisha was crying at the defense table, but I couldn't tell if the tears were real or just another performance. The trial lasted 3 weeks. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Keisha Jenkins. Guilty of attempted murder, conspiracy, elder abuse, fraud, and financial exploitation. Sentenced to 40 years in prison. Terrence Gaines. Guilty of conspiracy, fraud, and racketeering. Sentenced to 35 years in prison. Vincent Crawford. Guilty of organizing a criminal enterprise, conspiracy, fraud, money laundering, and accessory to multiple murders. Sentenced to life in prison without parole. Brenda Mitchell. Pled guilty to conspiracy and elder abuse. Sentenced to 10 years in prison with credit for cooperation. Monica Pritchard and the other operatives. Various sentences ranging from 15 to 30 years. When the verdict was read, I closed my eyes and said a prayer of thanks. Justice had been served. But the trial was only part of my healing. After it ended, I had to figure out how to rebuild my life. My house was released from being a crime scene, but I couldn't bear to go back there. Too many bad memories. Mr. Washington helped me sell it, and I bought a smaller place closer to Lorraine, a cute 2-bedroom house with a garden. Darnell and I went to family therapy together. Slowly, painfully, we started to rebuild our relationship. It wasn't the same as before. It would never be the same. But we were finding a new normal. Isaiah spent every weekend with me. We planted tomatoes in my new garden. We went to movies. We talked about everything. His feelings about his mother, his fears, his hopes. That boy had been through trauma, but he was resilient. He was going to be okay. One Sunday, 6 months after the trial, I was at Greater Hope for service. Pastor Williams called me up to the front. "Sister Dorothy," he said, "this church family has watched you walk through the valley of the shadow of death. We've seen you face evil and come out victorious. We've seen you maintain your faith even when everything was falling apart. You are a testament to God's protection and the power of wisdom and courage." The congregation stood and applauded. I saw faces I'd known for 30 years. My church family who'd supported me through everything. I saw new faces, too. People who'd come because they'd heard my story and wanted to be part of a community that took care of its elderly members. After service, a young woman approached me nervously. "Mrs. Jenkins, I'm sorry to bother you, but I wanted to thank you." "Thank me? Why?" "My grandmother was being pressured by her caretaker to sign over her property. After she heard your story on the news, she called me for help. We investigated, and the caretaker was stealing from her. Because of you, we caught it before it was too late. You saved my grandmother." I hugged her tight, tears streaming down my face. "Baby, I'm so glad. That's what it was all for, to stop them from hurting anyone else." Over the next year, I received dozens of letters from people telling similar stories. Elderly people who'd recognized the warning signs because of my case. Family members who'd intervened to protect their loved ones. New laws being passed to better protect seniors from financial exploitation. My nightmare had become a catalyst for change. On Isaiah's 11th birthday, Darnell brought him to my house for cake. The 3 of us sat in my kitchen, eating chocolate cake that I'd made from scratch. "Grandma," Isaiah said, "at school we had to write about our hero. I wrote about you." "Me?" I was surprised. "Yeah." My teacher asked why, and I said because you're brave and smart and you never gave up. Even when bad people tried to hurt you, you survived. You're my hero, Grandma. I pulled him close, my heart full. This beautiful, brave boy, my grandson, who'd saved my life. "You're my hero too, Isaiah," I told him. "You saved me. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you know how much I love you." Darnell reached across the table and took my hand. Mama, I know I can't undo what happened, but I want you to know, I see you now. I see your strength, your wisdom, everything that makes you who you are. And I promise, for the rest of my life, I'm going to honor you the way you deserve. I squeezed his hand. That's all I've ever wanted, son, just to be seen and valued. That night, after they left, I sat on my back porch watching the sunset. I thought about Raymond, about how far I'd come since that terrible Sunday dinner. I'd faced evil and survived. I'd stood up for myself when it would have been easier to be a victim. I'd helped change laws and protect others. I was 69 years old, and I was finally, truly free. Free from fear. Free from people who wanted to use me. Free to live the rest of my life on my own terms. And that freedom? That was worth more than any amount of money Keisha and Terrence had been trying to steal. I'd won. Not just the trial, but my life back, my dignity, my peace. And nobody could ever take that away from me again. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.